The beam of Mark's heavy flashlight cut through a darkness so thick it felt almost liquid. He stood in a narrow, windowless hallway where the temperature had dropped so fast his breath bloomed in white clouds. Below his boots, the smooth, polished concrete of the facility's sub-basement had ended, replaced by damp, packed earth. In the quiet gloom, 6 inches past the glow of his lantern, a slow and heavy breath rattled in the cold air. It was not his own. The sound came from something standing directly in front of him, motionless in the dark. He knew with absolute certainty that according to every floor plan in the building, this space did not exist. To understand why that moment in the pitch darkness still keeps Mark awake 10 years later, we have to go back to the beginning. It was October of 2014 when Mark took a job as the sole night shift security guard at the Oak Ridge Administrative Center. The facility was an aging 3-story brick building constructed in 1978, surrounded by dense pine woods outside a quiet town in central Pennsylvania. His duties were straightforward. He was hired to conduct 4 perimeter walks, monitor 12 closed-circuit camera feeds, and secure all exterior doors between 11 at night and 7 in the morning. It was meant to be the easiest paycheck he had ever earned. For the first 2 months, the routine was entirely predictable. The building sat quiet and dead after 7 in the evening. Mark spent his nights in the small guard booth near the front lobby, drinking coffee from a thermos and listening to the radio. Every 3 hours, he took his master key ring and made his rounds through the carpeted offices on the upper floors before taking the freight elevator down to the sub-basement. Sub-basement C housed the main electrical panels, water heaters, and long-forgotten archival storage rooms. The property manager, a quiet elderly man named Arthur, had handed Mark a blue leather binder during his orientation containing the complete architectural blueprints for the entire structure. Every corridor in the blueprint was clearly marked with dimensions, emergency exits, and wall thicknesses. Mark had memorized almost every corner of the building by his 3rd month, but on a freezing night in early December, something broke the routine. While walking down the main hallway of sub-basement C near the back storage bays, Mark noticed a faint draft. It blew against his ankles, carrying the sharp odor of damp clay and old wet soil. He stopped and looked up. The ceiling vents were completely shut for winter maintenance. There was no mechanical reason for air movement in that part of the building. Curious, Mark followed the cool draft to the very end of the hallway. The hallway ended at a tall stack of surplus metal shelving units packed with dusty paper files from 1982. Mark had walked past these shelves dozens of times without a second thought. But tonight, shining his flashlight into the small gap behind the steel frames, he saw something unusual. The light reflected off a smooth metallic surface buried deep behind the shelving. Mark set down his clipboard and worked for 20 minutes to carefully drag the heavy steel shelves away from the concrete wall. Behind them, recessed deep into the wall, sat a heavy gray iron door. It had no handle, no latch, and no signs of recent use, only an oversized iron keyhole in the center. Mark stepped back and unlocked his blue binder to check the architectural blueprints. He scanned the yellowed pages carefully, tracing his finger along sub-basement C to the exact spot where he stood. On paper, the hallway ended cleanly at a 30-inch poured concrete retaining wall, backed directly by solid earth and the building foundations. There was no door recorded anywhere in the original construction plans from 1978, nor in any of the subsequent renovation documents. It was as if someone had built a sealed entrance and then deliberately erased it from the official records. Mark stared at the cold iron door, realizing that whatever lay behind it had been hidden for over 35 years. The next evening, driven by restless curiosity, Mark searched the master key drawer in the security office. Deep in the back, tucked under a stack of expired parking permits, he found a solitary brass key attached to a faded wooden tag. The tag had no text written on it, only 3 deep vertical scratches carved into the surface. At 2 in the morning, when the building was entirely silent, Mark returned to the sub-basement. He inserted the key into the heavy iron lock. It turned with a loud, sickening crack of rusted tumblers, echoing down the empty concrete hallway. He pushed firmly. The heavy metal door creaked open inward, releasing a wave of freezing, stagnant air into his face. Beyond the iron door lay no concrete walls, no electrical conduits, and no fluorescent fixtures. Instead, Mark found a narrow, hand-dug tunnel lined with coarse red brick that curved sharply downward into the dark. The floor was soft, unpaved earth. Mark adjusted his grip on his heavy flashlight and stepped across the threshold. The transition was immediate. The hum of the facility generators behind him vanished, replaced by an absolute, oppressive silence. As he walked slowly down the incline, his boots left deep impressions in the fine dust. The brickwork gradually gave way to raw, carved bedrock, suggesting this passage had been carved out long before the administrative center above it was ever designed. 50 yards into the tunnel, the beam of his light illuminated small objects scattered on the ground. Mark knelt down to examine them. Half buried in the dry dust was an old digital wristwatch with a broken strap. Its screen was frozen forever at 3:14. A few feet further, half covered by falling gravel, lay a heavy silver flashlight. Mark picked it up with trembling hands. It was the exact same heavy-duty model as the flashlight he was currently holding in his left hand, down to the brand name stamped on the side. But this one was corroded, its casing pitted with age, as if it had been sitting in the damp earth for decades. A cold chill ran down his spine. Mark swept his light further down the narrow passage. That was when he saw the footprints. Clear, distinct boot impressions were pressed into the soft dust ahead of him, leading deeper into the subterranean darkness. But as he stepped closer to examine them, Mark realized something that made his blood run cold. There were no returning tracks. The boots had walked inward, step by step, and then abruptly stopped right where his own boots were currently resting. At that exact moment, his flashlight flickered twice and dimmed to a faint amber glow. In the pitch blackness that followed, he heard it, a heavy, ragged breathing directly in his ear. Panicking, Mark scrambled backward, dropping the corroded flashlight and sprinting toward the dim rectangle of light at the end of the tunnel. He lunged through the doorway, grabbed the heavy iron edge, and slammed the door shut with all his weight. The lock clicked into place just as a solid, dull thud slammed against the iron from the inside. If you are enjoying this terrifying true account, please take 1 second to like the video and subscribe to the channel now. Mark stood breathing heavily in the concrete hallway, locking the heavy deadbolt 3 times. He pushed the heavy metal shelving units back into position, covering the hidden entrance entirely before running up the stairs. Mark resigned from his position the very next morning, leaving his keys and his blueprint binder on the desk without waiting to collect his final paycheck. The property manager, Arthur, never called him to ask why he left so abruptly. When Mark later searched public land registries for the property, he discovered that the land beneath the Oak Ridge Center had been closed off by state authorities in 1942 after 2 local road inspectors vanished without a trace while surveying the hill. The official state reports listed their disappearance as a ground cave-in, but no structural collapse was ever documented by the search parties sent into the area. To this day, Mark refuses to enter any basement or underground parking structure. He lives in a single-story house with no cellar, and before renting any space, he personally verifies the architectural plans against the physical walls. But what haunts him most is not the dark tunnel or the unrecorded door. It is the rusted flashlight he found buried in the dust. When he examined his own flashlight that night in the guard booth, he found 3 identical scratches on the casing, matching the wooden tag on the key. If you've experienced a quiet horror that defies explanation, share your story in the comments below, and subscribe for more alleged true encounters.